Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you had a nice lunch. I was telling, this is actually a continuation of the executive session, only that there are more people here. But I was telling those who attended the executive session that before coming to Zurich, I was in Boston for a month because I was invited by the Harvard Kennedy School to be among the 5 Hauser Fellows. And while I was there, I was expected to talk a lot about democracy in Asia. So at the start of the session, we were talking about what's happening in Myanmar. We were talking about what's happening in Thailand, in Indonesia, in Cambodia, many other parts of Asia, where democracy is being challenged right now. But among the many questions being asked of me is, what's happening in the Philippines? What happened during the elections? Why has the pendulum swung to the other side? And they were referring to the fact that as far as the Philippine political history is concerned, we were coming from one side of the pendulum into another. I was telling the others at the executive session, and I think this is important to understand why the Filipinos were very vulnerable as far as this information is concerned. It's because there has been a lot of frustrations about the democratic processes that have been happening in the Philippines for so long. The Philippines was colonized for many years. Almost 400 years by Spain, about 40 years by America, an even shorter period by Japan. But we were able to gain our independence 1945, our complete independence in 1945. And, you know, we observed all the democratic processes. And we had one president after another. Our democracy was patterned after the US. So we were having the time of our lives, being independent. But, you know, the frustrations were brewing in the sense that during our colonial history, political power was actually entrenched in the well-off, the well-connected. They were the most powerful. And even after we gained our democracy, the democratic leaders and the democratic institutions were not able to diffuse power from the well-off, such that even now, political power is still lodged in the well-off and the well-connected. If you look at Philippine politics, it's very, very usual that you have political dynasties. I was also telling the group that when I was a member of the House of Representatives, before I became Vice President, among the almost 300 members of the House of Representatives, there were only 34 of us who did not belong to well-entrenched political families. So the frustrations were brewing. People felt that despite the democratic improvements and advances in our processes, they never felt the benefits that should have come with it. And now that it is the age of disinformation, those frustrations were weaponized. But the ironic thing about it is that it is still the well-off who weaponize. It is still the political elite who weaponize those frustrations with the use of social media. Social media was the vehicle, and I was so surprised during the breaks that there are a number here from other countries who are also going through the same. Disinformation has been a very, very big threat to our democracy. We felt it all the more during the 2022 elections. But as I was telling the executive, the people at the executive session again, we saw it already starting even before the 2016 elections when I was elected Vice President. And then you ask again, why were we very vulnerable? Because people capitalized on our frustrations. I did an extensive course, an intensive course in Harvard. It was a 3-week course, 3 sessions in all, 2 hours each. And I only have 15 minutes. I will try to compress the 6 hours into the 10 minutes that's left. But just to show you how it was rolled out in the Philippines, social media works on algorithms. And in the Philippines, we in the opposition did not respond in the manner that we should have, as speedily as we could have. When we were seeing this information already, we tried to sweep them under the rug, saying that, oh, they're not true anyway, let's not dignify them, and we were so wrong. Because when we did not give people the alternative, people bought into the narrative that was being sold to them. And when we tried responding already, we were too late. We tried responding. Fake news was starting in 2015, 2016. We started responding only late 2018, early 2019. There were a lot of anti-disinformation groups already in the Philippines trying to respond. And then all the fact-checking were only relegated into our own echo chambers. We were not able to penetrate the fortresses that they were able to make. And I am telling you this because people I have talked to earlier during the break were saying it's happening already even in Europe. It's not just happening in Asia. Maybe it started earlier in the Philippines, but just to give you a bird's eye view of how difficult it is once it's there already. There's no playbook yet. We're in the process of trying to understand how to fight it. But it has threatened our democracy in ways that we could never have imagined it would. It has trampled our electoral processes. It has trampled the way people feel about things. When we were looking at the results of the elections, students who had the option, who had access to more information, were the least likely to buy into the narrative of the fake news peddlers. People who had access to a lot of information, people who would have at their doorstep options, they would have a better chance at deciding which is true and which is not. And it's the most difficult thing in the sense that if people's minds are so made up, public officials become less accountable already. There is no scrutiny of public officials anymore. Not just in the Philippines, but in many other parts of the world where disinformation is so great. It has become a veritable breeding ground of autocrats or would-be autocrats. As we have been discussing during the break, we are in several levels, different levels of disinformation already. In the Philippines, we've felt its effects because of the elections. But we are still in the middle of it all. And we are afraid. We are afraid because we don't know how to react. What we have now are best practices. One of the things that we're looking at is how Taiwan did it during the pandemic. You know, Taiwan acted through its Ministry of Information. Every time there's fake news that's being said, Taiwan would do a fast, fun, and fair response. Meaning to say, before this information becomes the norm, it's the Ministry of Information who corrects immediately the disinformation. And the difficult thing about it is if this information is state-sponsored, then it will be more difficult. In the Philippines, one of the most difficult things that happen is that there is no net neutrality. When I say that there is no net neutrality, some of the social media sites are being offered by the telco companies for free, like Facebook, YouTube, TikTok. For telco companies to offer it as a come-on for their subscribers, they offer the social media platforms for free. But what is the effect? The effect is that because they are so accessible already, it becomes their only source of information. So legitimate media, for all its faults, would have been the better source of news still because they are subjected to accountability. But in Facebook, people can post on anonymity. and there is no accountability at all. But in the Philippines, it's a main source of information already because it's free. It's available on free data. India did not allow it to be available on free data. There's been a lot of debate on this because, India was able to regulate because everything is not free. Everything is not free, so the accessibility to these sites spewing this information is not as great as in the Philippines. There's also a debate about this because the debate is that it can be used by the powers that be also. We are looking at many best practices in the Philippines, as I've said earlier during the early part of the discussion this morning. I was saying that despite our experiences, I still feel that we can reverse the tide. I can still feel that technology can be used for the good as long as we know how to use it. We saw some bright spots, especially during the campaign. During the campaign, because people were so aware that this information was working already in the Philippines, people just organically fought peddlers of this information. It was not, we did not have enough time, but people came in droves. They were organically fighting this information. And we were able to start a momentum that we feel is worth building on. There are some bright spots. I mentioned earlier about Iran. I am sure you have been reading about what's happening in Iran now. We saw what happened in Brazil. Brazil was also a breeding ground of a lot of disinformation, but we saw what happened when civil society and the grassroots organizations took it upon themselves to band together. So the main idea as far as fighting disinformation is concerned is those of us who are here fighting disinformation, we should all band together. Even if we don't know how to fight it off yet, even if there are a lot of suggestions already, there are not enough literature out there because it's happening as I speak. But if we band together and share best practices, then perhaps we could be able to achieve some things. As far as the other democracies in Southeast Asia is concerned, Tom was saying earlier that 2024 is an important year. 2027 is a more important year. But 2023, 2024, we would see many elections in Southeast Asia. There will be elections in Thailand. There will be elections in Indonesia. There is coming elections in Cambodia or Myanmar. And it's worth looking at because the elections will decide where the trajectory will be again. There's a lot of many different groups trying to band together now. I was telling the group earlier that I don't know if you've heard about Maria Ressa, our 2021 Nobel Peace Prize winner, who's a Filipino journalist. She's done extensive work on this information already, and she's been doing a lot of work still, trying to lobby for legislation to be passed, not just in the Philippines, but all over the world. Legislation to be passed trying to make social media platforms accountable because they have not been self-regulating enough. And there's a lot of promise out there as long as we are all in this together. So while the prospects are bleak, there is much to hope for. During the campaign, our rallies would have millions of people clad in pink because that was our political color. And even if we lost the elections, there is a lot of hope that people are actually willing to fight the good fight against many of the forces that are threatening our democracy. So thank you very much. Have a good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you very much.